The body was found at 17 minutes past 9 on a Thursday evening in October at the foot of the grand staircase of Beaumont Hall, a country house of sufficient size and pretension to appear on 3 county maps and to require, in its present incarnation as a private hotel, a staff of 11 and a manager who wore his title like a man wearing a suit 2 sizes too large. The dead woman was Mrs. Cecily Farnsworth, aged 44. She lay on the checkered marble floor of the entrance hall in a position that the coroner would later describe, with the clinical restraint of his profession, as consistent with a fall from height. Her neck was broken, her right arm was extended above her head as though she had reached in the last instant for something, a banister, a wall, a hand, and found only air. The staircase from which she had fallen, or from which she had been thrown, rose from the entrance hall in a wide, sweeping curve, the kind of architectural statement that was fashionable in country houses of the Edwardian period and which says, to those who know how to listen, someone once had money. The balustrade was oak, dark with age, polished to a mirror finish by decades of careful hands. At the top of the stairs, a wide landing connected the first-floor corridor to the east and west wings of the house. It was from this landing that Mrs. Cecily Farnsworth had fallen, or been pushed. The distinction was, as Hercule Poirot would remark 3 days later, the only thing that mattered in the world. He had not been at Beaumont Hall when it happened. He had arrived the following morning, summoned not by the police. The local constabulary had reached their conclusion with a speed that should have embarrassed them, but by a letter that had reached him at Whitehaven Mansions on the Friday morning, postmarked Oxfordshire, written in a hand that was precise and small and quite unlike the hand of a frightened person, which made it, in Poirot's estimation, all the more alarming. The letter read, "Dear Monsieur Poirot, my name is Edmund Carey. I am blind. I have been blind since the age of 7 as the result of an illness, and I say this not to ask for your sympathy, but because it is the central fact of everything that follows. Last evening at Beaumont Hall in Oxfordshire, a woman named Cecily Farnsworth fell to her death from the first-floor landing. The police have declared it an accident. They are wrong. I know she was pushed because I was standing 12 feet away when it happened. I heard everything. They will tell you that the testimony of a blind man is worthless, that without sight one cannot be a witness. I'm asking you to tell them they are mistaken. I will be at the hall until Sunday. E. Carey Poirot read the letter twice. Then he went to his bedroom, packed a valise with his characteristic geometric precision, shirts folded to exact dimensions, his grooming implements arranged in ascending order of size, and instructed his housekeeper that he would be away for several days. "Countryside, sir?" she asked, knowing the signs. "Countryside," he confirmed. Then, reaching for his overcoat, "The little grey cells require fresh air, madame, or so Hastings has always claimed. We shall test the theory." He took the 9:15 from Paddington. Beaumont Hall presented itself to the world with the self-conscious grandeur of a house that has fallen in the world and knows it but refuses, on principle, to acknowledge the descent. The grounds were immaculate, money spent on the visible things, the lawns, the gravel drive, the flower beds, while a knowing eye could detect, in the mortar between the stones and the paint around the window frames, the quiet evidence of deferred expenditure. The manager was a Mr. Gerald Polton, a man of 45 whose manner was simultaneously obsequious and defensive, like a man who has spent 20 years apologizing for things that were not his fault and has begun to resent it. "Monsieur Poirot?" He did not seem surprised. "We heard you might come." "The family, Mrs. Farnsworth's brother. He telephoned from London this morning. He is expected this afternoon. The police have completed their examination. Inspector Graves, he was here until 10 last evening. He is satisfied that it was an accident. The balustrade is sound. Mrs. Farnsworth had been drinking, apparently. The physician confirms she had consumed a quantity of wine at dinner." The inspector believes she leaned too far over the railing, became dizzy, and Polton made a gesture that was attempting to be neutral and was not quite managing it. And the landing was empty. There were no witnesses. Polton hesitated. The shortest hesitation, barely a quarter second. But Poirot's eyes missed nothing. Inspector Graves spoke to all the guests. There was no one on the landing at the time. Mr. Edmund Carey was not mentioned to Inspector Graves. Another hesitation. Longer this time. Mr. Carey was in the corridor near the east wing. He told the inspector he had heard the fall. He could not describe what he had seen for obvious reasons. And the inspector felt that. The inspector felt that the testimony of a blind man was worthless. Poirot's voice was perfectly level. Yes, and where might I find Mr. Carey? Edmund Carey was in the library. He was a man of 52, and Poirot, who made it a practice never to be surprised by people's appearances, was nonetheless arrested for a moment by the quality of stillness that Edmund Carey carried with him. He sat in a leather chair beside the window. The window, not the fire. Not for warmth, then, but for reasons of habit or orientation. With his hands resting on the arms of the chair, or in the particular relaxed readiness of a man accustomed to existing without visual reference. His face was turned slightly toward the door, though he could not have seen it. He had heard Poirot's footsteps in the corridor. He was not a handsome man. The face was too angular for that, the jaw too prominent. But it was a face of considerable intelligence, the face of a man who had been forced, by necessity, to develop resources that sighted people never bother with. His eyes were a clear gray blue. They focused, when he turned toward Poirot, on a point approximately 4 inches to Poirot's left. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "you came quickly. When a blind man writes to tell me he has witnessed a murder, I do not dawdle, Monsieur Carey. Will you tell me what you heard?" Edmund Carey was quiet for a moment. Then, "Sit down, please. I dislike talking to someone who might be standing or might be halfway across the room. It is disconcerting." Poirot sat in the chair opposite with the precise care of a man who respects another man's request. "Tell me first," said Carey, "whether you believe me. I have not yet heard what you have to say. I cannot tell you whether I believe it. The police didn't believe me. Inspector Graves was quite kind about it. The patronizing kindness of a man who thinks he's being gracious. He said my hearing was obviously excellent, that he had no doubt I'd heard the fall, but that I could not testify to what preceded it, since I could not see what preceded it." "And what did precede it?" Edmund Carey turned his face toward the window. In the October light, pale, thin, the light of a season retreating, his profile was sharp and certain. "I will tell you exactly what I heard," he said, "and I will tell you in sequence, because sequence is everything. I've been blind for 45 years, Monsieur Poirot. I do not hear sounds, I hear events. There is a difference that sighted people rarely understand." "Explain it to me." "A sighted person hears a sound and looks to see what made it. The sound is a prompt to look. For me, the sound is the information. I do not hear a bang and turn my head. I hear a specific kind of bang and know from its pitch, its duration, its direction, its resonance, whether it came from wood or metal, from a large object or small, from a distance of 5 feet or 20. I have 45 years of practice in a skill that most people never develop at all." "Continue." "It was 9:15. I was walking from the east wing toward the landing. I walk every evening after dinner, the same route, 17 steps from my room to the landing, then 12 steps across the landing to the west side, then back. I know this house well. I've stayed here 3 times. "You were on the landing itself?" "I had reached it. I was approximately 10 feet from the top of the stairs. I stopped because I heard someone else already on the landing." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Someone else? How did you know?" "Breathing. A person standing still breathes in a particular way. There was a person on the landing. approximately 15 feet to my right, close to the east wing door, breathing in the way of someone who is waiting. Not moving. Waiting. Could you determine whether it was a man or a woman? Not with certainty. The breathing was controlled, deliberate, as though the person was making an effort to breathe quietly. Which is itself significant, is it not? Why does one breathe quietly in an empty corridor if one is simply waiting? Poirot said nothing. Carey continued. I stopped. I did not announce myself. I'm accustomed to being unnoticed, another advantage of blindness that sighted people rarely consider. People forget I'm in a room because they cannot catch my eye, because there is no eye contact to remind them of my presence. I stood still, and I listened. What did you hear next? Footsteps on the stairs. Coming up, a woman, heeled shoes on the wooden treads, the particular sound of a woman ascending at a moderate pace. She reached the landing. She stopped. There was a brief silence. 4 seconds, perhaps 5. And then the person who had been waiting spoke. Poirot's eyes sharpened. They spoke. 2 words, spoken quietly. Not a whisper, but the tone of a voice lowered deliberately, so as not to carry. I could not determine the sex with certainty. The deliberate lowering of the voice masks the higher or lower registers. But the words were clear. What were the words? Edmund Carey paused. The 2 words were, "You're late." The silence that followed these 2 words was itself a kind of punctuation. And then? Poirot asked. Then, very quickly, within 2 seconds, a sound that I have spent 24 hours thinking about and cannot mistake. The sound of impact, not a struggle. No cry of alarm, no scuffle, no raised voice. Just the impact. Brief, violent, the sound of force applied suddenly to a body. And then the terrible sound of a person falling downstairs. It is not a sound you forget. Poirot sat very still. In 30 years of investigating death, he had heard many witnesses describe what they had seen. It was rarer, and in its rarity more valuable, to find one who could describe what they had heard with this quality of precision. You said no cry of alarm, he said carefully. No, nothing. One moment she was on the landing, the next she was falling. She had no time to cry out. It was that fast. Which means she did not slip. She did not lose her balance. She did not lean too far over the balustrade. She was struck or pushed by someone who was already in position, who had been waiting for her, who knew she was coming and acted the instant she arrived. The person who said you're late. Yes, and this person, after the fall. Immediately afterward, footsteps. Fast but not running. The footsteps of someone who knows that running is conspicuous. They moved across the landing in the direction of the west wing. A door opened and closed. The corridor was empty. I was alone on the landing with the sound of what had just happened and the sound of people downstairs beginning to shout. Poirot stood. He walked, without asking permission, to the window and stood looking out at the Oxfordshire countryside, the elm trees, the November coming fields, the sky that was trying to decide between grey and white and had settled, with the indecision of the English climate, on both. Mr. Carey, he said. The police inspector said there were no witnesses on the landing. He was wrong. You were there. He said a blind man could not witness a murder. A blind man, said Poirot quietly, witnessed this murder far more completely than any sighted person would have done. A sighted witness would have seen one thing at a time, would have looked where their eye was drawn. You heard everything simultaneously. You heard the waiting, the breathing, the footsteps, the words, the impact, the retreat. You built a complete picture from sound, while a sighted person, shown the same scene, might have noticed only the fall. Carey's face turned toward him. There was something in it. Not hope exactly, but the precursor to hope. The expression of a man who has been told something true after being offered, repeatedly, comfortable falsehoods. The inspector was very certain, Carey said. Inspectors are always very certain, Poirot replied. It is one of their defining characteristics. Come, I must meet the other guests of Beaumont Hall, and you, Monsieur Carey, must tell me everything you know about Mrs. Cecily Farnsworth. The guests of Beaumont Hall numbered 7 at the time of Cecily Farnsworth's death, including the dead woman herself. Poirot spent the Friday afternoon in a series of conversations that he conducted with the deceptive airiness of a man making social calls, while registering everything with the total attention of a machine designed for exactly this purpose. The first was Mrs. Vera Ashworth, aged 61, who had known Cecily Farnsworth for 30 years and who was managing the considerable task of appearing grief-stricken while being, visibly, also something else. Not guilty. Poirot had seen guilt often enough to distinguish it from the emotion Mrs. Ashworth was concealing. Something more complicated, something like relief being fought down with conscious effort. She was my dearest friend, Mrs. Ashworth said, in the sitting room she had been allocated for the interview, the fire burning too high because she had insisted on more coal, and the underfunded hospitality of Beaumont Hall had complied. I cannot imagine. I still cannot. She was here at dinner. She was perfectly well. What did you speak about at dinner? Oh, the usual. The countryside, London, the dreadfulness of the summer we'd had. Cecily was... She was in good spirits. She had had some wine, yes, rather more than usual, but she was not incapacitated. Whatever that inspector suggested. Were there things beneath the surface? Poirot asked, with the gentle directness that wrong-footed people who expected the question to come from a different direction. At dinner, or during your stay here? Vera Ashworth's hands, resting on her lap, moved slightly. Things beneath the surface. That is a delicate way to put it. I find delicacy useful. It tends to produce more honesty than bluntness. She looked at him, a long, assessing look. Cecily was unhappy, she said at last. She had been unhappy for some time. Her marriage, her husband, Robert Farnsworth. It was not a good marriage. It had not been for several years. They were estranged. Legally married. Functionally. Not much more than acquaintances who shared a house. Robert is a cold man, correct in all the external ways. He would not have been unkind to Cecily in any way that could be pointed to. He was merely indifferent. And indifference, as I am sure you know, Monsieur Poirot, is the cruelest form of cruelty, because it leaves no evidence. Was there someone else? For Mrs. Farnsworth? Again, the slight movement of the hands. I am not sure it is my place. She is dead, Mrs. Ashworth. The question of whose place it is has been rather overtaken by events. There was a friendship that had become something more significant. With a Mr. Lawrence Vane. He is here at the Hall. He was the reason Cecily came this weekend. Or one of the reasons. They had been finding time together, you understand, when Robert's attention was elsewhere. And Robert Farnsworth. Where is he? London. He is coming today or tomorrow. I believe someone has told him. He did not know about Lawrence. A pause. Or if he did, he gave no indication. The second conversation was with Lawrence Vane. He was 38, 12 years younger than Cecily Farnsworth, and he carried the specific combination of charm and unease that belongs to a man who has relied on his charm for so long that it has become, in moments of genuine crisis, useless to him. He was handsome, the dark, slightly theatrical handsomeness that photographs well and wears, over time, with a certain transparency, so that the person beneath it becomes more visible than they would prefer. He was also, Poirot observed, frightened. Beneath the practiced ease of manner, behind the appropriate display of grief, there was something sharp and anxious working away at him like a splinter in the thumb. We were close friends, he said. That's all I'll say at this stage. Close friends. How long had you known Mrs. Farnsworth? 2 years. We met at a gallery opening in London. She knew a great deal about art. More than I did, frankly. And I'd studied it. A ghost of real feeling crossed his face. The kind that slips past the performance when the guard is briefly down. She was the most intelligent woman I'd known. Not in the way people say about women to be complimentary. I mean actually intelligent. The kind of intelligence that makes you feel that you yourself are thinking more clearly just by being in the same room. Were you aware that she was unhappy in her marriage? I was aware of the marriage. Yes. Were you aware that Robert Farnsworth may have known about your friendship? Something happened in Lawrence Vane's face. A rapid, complicated event. There 1 second, suppressed the next, that Poirot could not read precisely, but which contained, he was quite certain, the element of fear. There was something, last week. She telephoned me, quite late. She was distressed. She said she thought Robert had been looking through her correspondence, that he had found. She didn't specify, but she was frightened. Frightened of her husband, of what he might do, if he knew. And what did you tell her? Vane looked at his hands. I told her to come to the hall, that we needed to talk properly, in person. She arrived Wednesday. She died Thursday evening. You were at dinner on Thursday. Yes. And afterward, I went to the smoking room, then to my room. I was not on the landing. You were not on the landing, Poirot repeated, in the precise, neutral tone of a man who is recording a statement rather than evaluating it. No. Very good. One more question, Monsieur Vane. The two of you, was there a plan? A plan for the future? For Mrs. Farnsworth's future? Vane looked at him steadily, but the steadiness cost him something. She was going to ask Robert for a divorce. Next month. We had agreed. I had asked her to marry me. He said it quietly, and there was enough truth in the quietness that even Poirot, who made it a discipline never to be moved by what he was investigating, felt the weight of it. A woman had agreed to rebuild her life, and someone had ended that life on a Thursday evening on a sweeping staircase in Oxfordshire. The third conversation of importance was with the hotel's night porter, a young man named William Spence, 19 years old, from the village, who worked the desk from 8 in the evening until 6 in the morning and who had, on the night of the death, been in his small booth near the main entrance when Mrs. Farnsworth fell. I heard it, sir, the sound of the fall. I went to see. It was already too late. In the moments before you heard the fall, did you see anyone on the stairs? Anyone on the landing? No, sir. The hall was empty. I'd looked up not a minute before, because I heard footsteps on the upper landing, someone moving about, and I looked, but there was no one in sight. The landing was empty from where I stood. And after the fall, who came first? Mr. Polton from his office. He hears everything. Mr. Polton does. Then 2 of the guests from the dining room. Then Dr. Waller. He's staying at the hall. He came down from the first floor. From the first floor? The east wing or the west? William Spence frowned. The west, I think. He came from the west wing staircase. There's a back stair. He came down that way. Poirot made a note. Not on paper. He never wrote things down during interviews. He made notes in the architectural filing system of his memory, where everything went to the correct folder and waited. And after Dr. Waller, who else? Mr. Carey, sir, the blind gentleman. He was already on the landing when I came up, just standing there, very still. He said he had heard it happen. Did he seem distressed? Not distressed exactly, sir. More concentrated, like he was holding on to something inside his head that he didn't want to let go of. Yes, said Poirot. That is precisely what he was doing. Dr. Gerald Waller was the guest who interested Poirot most, and for reasons he had not yet articulated even to himself. A sign in his experience that the little grey cells were working on something that had not yet risen to the level of conscious thought. He was a physician, retired, he said, from a practice in Bath. here at the Hall on a brief holiday, walking the Oxfordshire paths, taking the autumn air. He was 61 years old, with the brisk, deliberate manner of a medical man, and a face that had been, decades ago, probably considered handsome and was now merely authoritative. He received Poirot in his room on the first floor, the West Wing. The room was tidy in the way of a man who does not unpack entirely, who keeps his bag within reach. The window looked out over the rear gardens and, at an angle, the drive. "I've been expecting you," he said without preamble. "Polton told me you'd arrived. Hercule Poirot, I know the name, of course." He said this without flattery, as a simple statement of fact. "What do you want to know?" "You came down by the back stair after the fall." "I did. Faster that way." "From this room?" "Yes." "You were in your room when it happened." A brief pause. The briefness of it was calibrated. The pause of a man who knows his answer will be checked, and has checked it himself in advance. "I was reading. I heard the fall from here. The sound travels in this house. I went immediately." "And before the fall, you were here the entire evening?" "After dinner, yes. I was in my room." "You did not, at any point, go out onto the first floor landing?" "No." Poirot looked around the room, a brief, apparently casual survey that took in the wardrobe, the desk, the chair by the window, the traveling bag. On the desk was a medical journal, open to a page of dense text. On the chair, a jacket. In the jacket's breast pocket, the corner of an envelope. "Tell me," Poirot said in the same easy tone, "did you know Mrs. Farnsworth before this weekend?" The pause this time was longer, and it had a different quality. The quality of a decision being made. "We had met." "Yes, some years ago." Then, with the tone of a man getting ahead of something, "I was her husband's physician, before I retired." Poirot said nothing. He had found over many decades that silence, placed correctly, extracted more information than any question. Waller seemed to feel the pull of it. "I was Robert Farnsworth's doctor for 12 years. I retired in 1930. We kept in touch. Correspondence, occasionally. The professional relationship does not entirely disappear." "And Mrs. Farnsworth, did she correspond with you?" "On occasion, through her husband, as was proper." "Was the relationship between Mr. and Mrs. Farnsworth something you were aware of? Its difficulties?" Waller's face was very still. "Robert is a private man. He does not discuss his personal life. But you knew about Mr. Lawrence Vane." Nothing moved in Gerald Waller's face, and it was this absence of movement, the absolute, practiced blankness of it, that told Poirot more than any change of expression would have done. "I know only what Robert has told me," Waller said. "I am his friend. I'm not his detective." "No," Poirot agreed pleasantly. "That is my function." He stood, adjusted his cuffs with his characteristic precision, and moved to the door. At the threshold, he paused. Another technique. The pause at the door, the question that seems to be an afterthought. "Dr. Waller, you came down by the back stair very quickly. You were one of the first to the body. Did you examine Mrs. Farnsworth?" "I checked for a pulse. She was dead. There was nothing to be done." "You are a physician. Did you observe anything about the body? Any injuries that were inconsistent with a simple fall?" Waller's eyes met Poirot's directly. They were steady, controlled, the eyes of a man who has made his choice and intends to hold to it. "She fell down a long staircase onto a marble floor," he said. "The injuries were what one would expect." "Yes," said Poirot. "Of course they were." He left. Robert Farnsworth arrived at 3 o'clock that afternoon. He was exactly as Mrs. Ashworth had described, correct in all the external ways. He was 53, impeccably dressed for a man who had received news of his wife's death that morning and had traveled from London within hours, which told Poirot either that he was a man of impressive self-discipline or that grief was not the dominant emotion currently requiring management. He was tall and lean, with a face that would have been pleasant if its features had been rearranged in a warmer configuration. They had not been. The eyes were light blue and quite cold, and the hand he extended to Poirot was dry and firm and held no tremor whatsoever. "I understand you've been speaking to the other guests," he said. "On what authority?" "On no authority at all," Poirot said cheerfully. "I am a private citizen. I may speak to anyone who is willing to speak to me. If no one wishes to speak to me, they need only say so." Farnsworth assessed him for a moment with the measuring look of a man accustomed to calculating the weight and leverage of everything he encountered. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know where you were on Thursday evening." "In London, at my club. I dined there at 8 and remained until approximately 11. 40 or 50 members saw me. I'm not Monsieur Poirot, a man who lacks an alibi." "No, indeed you are not." Poirot paused. "You knew about Mr. Vane." "Not a flicker, not so much as the adjustment of a single facial muscle." "I beg your pardon?" "Mr. Lawrence Vane, your wife's close friend. You were aware of the friendship." "Cecily had many friends." This one was proposing marriage. Farnsworth's eyes went very slightly harder. It was the only indication that the shot had landed, and it was gone within a second. "I cannot imagine what you mean." "You knew," Poirot said quietly. "And you were furious. Not in the passionate sense. I do not think you are a man of passion, but in the cold, deliberate sense, the sense that required a solution. You are a man, Mr. Farnsworth, who requires solutions to problems. My wife is dead. I would appreciate it if you would phrase your speculation as speculation." "Of course. Naturally. There is something I would like to ask you, however, as a matter of fact rather than speculation. Dr. Gerald Waller, he tells me he was your physician and that you kept in correspondence." The pause was very short. "That is correct. He is here this weekend, at the same small country hotel as your wife at the same time. Did you know he would be here?" "Waller mentioned he was taking a few days in Oxfordshire." "He mentioned it to you specifically?" "We corresponded." "Yes," said Poirot. "I thought you might." That evening, after dinner, a meal he ate alone, having declined the table that Polton offered him among the other guests, Poirot walked to the east wing of the first floor and stood at the top of the grand staircase. He stood there for a long time. The hall below was lit by the central chandelier, the light falling in warm pools on the checkered marble. The stairs curved downward in their wide, elegant arc. The balustrade was solid. Poirot tested it, pressing his weight against it at the point where it would be easiest to lean. It held absolutely. The inspector's theory of an accidental lean and fall was, structurally, not impossible. But it was not, as Poirot's understanding of human movement and physics was telling him with increasing confidence, particularly likely. To fall over this balustrade, one would need to lean quite far outward, further than a person would lean from any ordinary impulse, even with wine taken. He stood at the top of the stairs, where the waiting person had stood, and looked down. A person ascending the stairs would come into view at the third or fourth step from the top. The waiting person, standing here by the east wing door, would see them coming from several seconds away. Time enough to prepare, time enough to move. He returned to his room and sent for Edmund Carey. Carey arrived in 6 minutes. Poirot had counted, navigating the corridors with a staff he had not used during their earlier conversation, the tip tapping a quiet code on the floorboards. He found the chair without assistance. "I want to revisit the voice," Poirot said. "The 2 words, 'You're late.'" "Yes. Think carefully. I know you have been thinking about it already, but I want you to hear it again, in your memory. The pitch, the resonance, the breath, anything that distinguished it." Carey was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focused on the middle distance. Not the unseeing vacancy of a sighted person lost in thought, but the active, directed quality of a man consulting a specific internal resource. The voice was low, he said at last. I had concluded it was deliberately lowered, but thinking further, no. I think the voice was naturally in that register. The lowering was of the volume, not the pitch. It is a distinction that matters. A man can lower his voice and sound lower than normal, or he can lower his volume while remaining in his natural register. And this voice, it was in its natural register, merely quietened. Yes, I believe so. And the natural register was a baritone, not a bass, not a tenor, a baritone, which is, I acknowledge, the most common male register and does not narrow the field considerably. But there was something else, a quality I have been trying to name. The consonants, the hard sounds, were clipped, very precisely formed, the L in late, the T at the end. A man who speaks very clearly, deliberately clearly, a man accustomed to being listened to, a man who expects to be heard, a man of authority. Yes, I would say so. Poirot steepled his fingers below his chin, his characteristic posture of interior calculation which Hastings had always described, when pressed, as what Poirot looked like when he was being most himself. There is another quality I'm interested in, Poirot said. You described the waiting, the controlled breathing, as the sound of someone who had been in position for some time. Not just arrived. Had been waiting. Yes, whoever stood at that door had been there for some minutes before Mrs. Farnsworth arrived. The breathing had the evenness of someone who has brought their heart rate down from exertion or anticipation. Or both. Or both. Yes. Mr. Carey. The footsteps after the fall. The retreat across the landing and through the door into the west wing. Can you tell me anything about the pace, the stride length, the weight of the step? Carey was still again. Longer this time. Heavy, he said at last. Not obese, but a substantial man. The footsteps had the density of a person of real physical weight. And the stride was measured. Deliberate, not the stride of a young man or a light one. The stride of someone who is physically confident and has been so for many years and has reached the age at which physical confidence becomes a habit rather than an effort. A man of 60, perhaps, or somewhere near it. Edmund Carey turned his face toward Poirot with an expression that was not quite surprise, but was its close relative. Yes, he said, I would say 60. Yes. Poirot stood. He went to the window and stood looking out at the dark grounds of Beaumont Hall. The lawns invisible in the October night, the elm trees barely discernible against the sky, one lit window on the ground floor where Gerald Waller's study was located. Monsieur Carey, when you told Inspector Graves what you had heard, did you tell him about the voice? The 2 words? I told him everything. He wrote it down. He nodded. He was very kind and very dismissive. He said the words I had heard could have been anything, that in the dark, sound distorts, that I might have heard something from another part of the building entirely. He was very apologetic about it. Yes, Poirot said. People often apologize when they are refusing to do what they should. You believe me. It was not quite a question. Poirot turned from the window. I believe you because you are precise, he said. Witnesses who fabricate are usually imprecise. They offer the broad strokes and leave the detail vague, because detail can be checked and broad strokes cannot. You have given me nothing but detail, the quality of the breathing, the register of the voice, the weight of the footstep. These are not the inventions of a frightened or confused person. These are the observations of a trained observer who has spent 50 years developing an instrument that most people have left to rust. Edmund Carey was quiet for a moment. She was kind to me, he said. It came out without preface or segue, in the way that true things sometimes emerge, sideways, when the formal channel is not available. Cecily Farnsworth. We had spoken several times during this stay. She did not do what people usually do with me. which is either talk to me very loudly or go very quiet, as though blindness is a form of deafness or a form of death. She spoke to me normally. She asked me what it was like to hear a symphony. She was curious rather than pitying. "Yes," said Poirot, and there was something in his voice that was not quite sadness but was adjacent to it. "I believe she was that kind of woman." "Then find who did it." "I have," said Poirot. He said it without drama, almost quietly, as though it was not the most significant sentence in the room. "I knew this morning. I required only confirmation of certain details, and you have now provided them." Edmund Carey's face was very still. "Then why are we still sitting here?" "Because the little grey cells," Poirot said, moving to the door with the particular decisiveness that preceded action, "are thorough, Monsieur Carey. They do not move until they are ready. But when they are ready—" He paused at the threshold. "They move with certainty." At 8 o'clock the following morning, Poirot requested that Mr. Polton assemble everyone in the main sitting room. He made the request with the polite implacability of a man who knows that polite implacability is irresistible. And Polton, who was at his core a man who recognized authority when it stood in front of him wearing a perfectly brushed overcoat, complied. They were all present at 8:30. Mrs. Vera Ashworth in black, her hands tight around a cup of tea she had not drunk. Lawrence Vane, pale, his performance of calm more strained than it had been the day before. Dr. Gerald Waller, precise and upright, his medical bag at his feet with the readiness that Poirot had noted before. Robert Farnsworth, who had arrived only yesterday and was already the still center of the room, the way that cold air occupies a space. And Edmund Carey, in the chair by the window that he had apparently claimed as his own, his hands resting on the arms, his face turned toward the middle of the room with the total attention of a man who listens where others look. Inspector Graves was also present. Poirot had telephoned him at 7 that morning, using a tone that suggested that attendance was strongly advisable and that the inspector's reputation stood to benefit from accepting the suggestion. Graves sat near the door. He was a solid, fair-minded man who knew, Poirot suspected, that he had made an error and who was prepared to see it corrected if corrected it needed to be. This was, in Poirot's estimation, the second best quality a policeman could possess, the first being not making the error in the beginning. Poirot stood at the fireplace. He did not have papers. He did not have evidence bags or photographs or any of the props that lesser detectives employed to fill the silences in their arguments. He had only the contents of his head, which were, as those present would shortly discover, quite sufficient. "I will not waste your time with method," he said. "You are not all equally interested in method, and the person who is most interested, since it was their method that brought us here, is already aware of how it was done. I will speak instead about what happened and why and who." Robert Farnsworth said, "This is highly—" "Please," Poirot said, with a gentleness that contained absolute finality. Farnsworth stopped. "Mrs. Cecily Farnsworth," Poirot continued, "was not a woman who fell down a staircase. She was a woman who was pushed down a staircase by a man who had been waiting for her in a specific position at a specific time, because he had arranged in advance for her to be at that position at that time." The room was very quiet. Outside, the October morning was grey and still, the kind of morning that has no weather of its own but borrows the weight of what is happening inside. Let us begin with a fact that the inspector's report overlooked, because the inspector did not know how to hear it. There was a witness on the landing on the night Mrs. Farnsworth died. A witness who was present throughout. A witness who heard the waiting, the breathing, the voice, the impact, and the retreat. That witness is Mr. Edmund Carey. He paused. Mr. Carey is blind. This is why Inspector Graves concluded that his testimony was of limited value. It is why the murderer, when he chose his position that evening, chose it without concern for Mr. Carey's presence, because a blind man, in the murderer's calculation, presented no risk of identification. This was a mistake of the most fundamental kind. And it is the mistake on which this case turns. Lawrence Vane was watching Edmund Carey with something close to wonder. Gerald Waller was watching Poirot, and only Poirot, with the absolute fixed attention of a man who knows the road ahead and is trying to calculate the distance remaining. Mr. Carey heard 2 words spoken by the person waiting on the landing. The words were, "You're late." These words tell us several important things. First, the meeting was arranged. Mrs. Farnsworth was not randomly encountered. She was expected. Second, the meeting was arranged by the person waiting, not by Mrs. Farnsworth herself. Because a person who has arranged a meeting does not apologize to the other party for being late. They say, "I'm sorry, I was delayed." The person who says you're late is the one who set the time. Gerald Waller's hands, flat on his knees, were very still. Third, Poirot continued, the meeting was arranged secretly. The voice was deliberately quietened, and the position on the landing, rather than somewhere more comfortable and observable, suggests that privacy was required. The murderer arranged a secret meeting with Cecily Farnsworth on the landing at a specific time and used the meeting as the mechanism for her death. "How was the meeting arranged?" Vera Ashworth asked. Her voice was careful. "By letter, which brings me to the envelope in the pocket." He turned to Gerald Waller. "When I was in your room yesterday afternoon, Dr. Waller, I observed an envelope in the breast pocket of your jacket. I did not comment on it at the time, but the envelope was pale blue, the particular pale blue of the notepaper that Mrs. Farnsworth used for her personal correspondence. I noticed this because the same notepaper was visible on the writing desk in Mrs. Farnsworth's room, where I had conducted a brief examination that morning." The silence in the room was of a quality that Poirot had encountered before. The silence of a group of people in the moment before a truth that changes everything. "Mrs. Farnsworth," Poirot said, "wrote a note to someone at this hotel. A note asking for a private meeting at 9:15 on Thursday evening on the landing because she needed to speak with someone urgently and did not wish to be observed. This note was given to Dr. Waller." "You are speculating," Waller said. His voice was perfectly controlled. "I speculate very rarely. Let us consider why Cecily Farnsworth would write to Gerald Waller. I gave this question the consideration it deserved. She did not know Waller as a friend. She knew him as her husband's physician, a man Robert Farnsworth trusted, corresponded with, who was present at this hotel at the same weekend as herself. When she saw Waller at the hall, on Wednesday when she arrived, she would have been alarmed. Because his presence here, at this hotel, at this time, was not coincidence. "Everything is coincidence," Waller said. "I was invited to—" "You were sent here," Poirot said. Not harshly, factually, with the weight of certainty. "By Robert Farnsworth, who knew his wife would be here this weekend, who knew about Mr. Vane, who knew about the divorce that was coming, who sent his oldest, most trusted friend, a physician who knew drugs, who knew the body, who knew what could be made to look like accident, to resolve the problem in the way that Robert Farnsworth resolves all problems, decisively, without mess." Robert Farnsworth said, very quietly, "This is absurd." When Cecily Farnsworth saw Gerald Waller here and understood why he had come, perhaps she did not understand immediately, but by Thursday she had thought it through, she was frightened. She wrote to him, not to confront him, but to bargain, to ask him, woman to man, to go back to London, to tell Robert that he had come and found no opportunity and could not do it. She asked for a meeting, privately, to speak with him, and he agreed to the meeting. Poirot's voice dropped slightly, and then he used it. Inspector Graves had his notebook open. He had not written in it. His pen was poised. "The medical bag," Poirot said, turning back to Waller. "You brought it down immediately. This was remarked on by the night porter, a physician arriving at an accident scene with his medical bag. Commendable. But a man relaxing in his room after dinner does not sit with his medical bag at his feet. He places it in the wardrobe, in the corner. He does not hold it close, unless he had been, recently, in his room for only a very short time, unless he had come back to his room, picked up his bag as the prop of his alibi, and walked down the back stair. Waller said nothing. "You pushed her," Poirot said. "At the moment she arrived at the top of the stairs when her momentum was still carrying her forward. You used that momentum. One movement, precise. A physician knows the body, knows the angles, the forces, the mechanics. The fall looked like a stumble, looked like an accident, because it was designed to look like one by a man who spent 40 years understanding how bodies move and fail." The room held its breath. "Edmund Carey," Poirot said, turning to the window. "Heard your breathing. He heard your voice. He heard your footstep. He is the most precise witness I've encountered in 30 years of this work, and he has told me that the person on that landing was a substantial man in late middle age, with a precisely articulated baritone voice and the deliberate gait of a person who carries physical authority as a long habit. There are 4 men at this hotel, Dr. Waller. One of them is 19. One is 38 and slight. One is 53 and lean. And one is 61 and has the build and voice and certainty of manner that Mr. Carey has described." Gerald Waller looked at Edmund Carey. It was a look of strange complexity. Not hatred, not contempt. Something more intricate. The look of a man who has planned everything carefully and been undone by the one variable he had not thought to control. "You couldn't see me," he said. He said it quietly, almost to himself, the way a man speaks when he is trying to understand how the world has done what it has done. Edmund Carey turned his face toward the voice with absolute precision. His gray-blue eyes found, by instinct and training, exactly the right place. "No," he said. "I could hear you." Inspector Graves made the arrest with the quiet, thorough efficiency that was, Poirot reflected, his genuine quality, whatever the deficiencies of his initial investigation. 2 constables had arrived at Beaumont Hall at 8 that morning at the inspector's request, on the grounds that Poirot had suggested over the telephone that such precaution was advisable. Gerald Waller went without protest, not because he was resigned. Poirot did not think resignation was in his character, but because he was a man of calculation, and he had already begun calculating the next stage. He would fight it in court. He would call the evidence insufficient. He would challenge Carey's testimony, attack the premise that sound alone could identify a man, argue reasonable doubt with expensive counsel and 30 years of professional reputation. He was not wrong that this was the strategy available to him. He was wrong in thinking it would succeed, but that was a matter for judges and juries and was not Poirot's current concern. As Waller was led through the entrance hall, past the foot of the grand staircase, past the spot marked in some invisible but permanent way by what had happened there, he paused. He turned to Poirot. "She wrote to me," he said. "In the letter. She said she knew why I'd come, and she was asking me, as one human being to another, to go back." A pause. "She said she had not done anything wrong, that she only wanted her life." "Yes," said Poirot. I do not think of myself as—" Waller stopped. Then, "Robert told me it was necessary." "And you believed him?" "I have known Robert Farnsworth for 30 years. He has always been decisive. He has always known what the situation required." "He required that you kill his wife," Poirot said. There was nothing in his voice. No inflection, no editorial. Just the words, placed in the air. Waller had no answer for this. He was led out. Robert Farnsworth was asked politely to remain at the hall pending further inquiries. He received this request with the still, cold composure of a man who still believed his alibi was impenetrable and his distance from the act uncrossable. He was wrong on both counts, but learning this would take some weeks, and the mechanisms of the law, and the sworn testimony of Edmund Carey. He would, in the end, be charged as the architect of the conspiracy. The jury would consider the correspondence between Waller and Farnsworth, letters that the police, now looking properly, found in both men's papers. The jury would hear the sequence of events. They would hear of the timing, the hotel, the letter in the pale blue envelope. They would hear of a man in London with an alibi who sent a friend with a medical bag to solve a problem. And they would hear Edmund Carey. Carey testified for 2 hours in the Old Bailey. He sat in the witness box with his hands on its rim and answered every question with the same deliberate precision that had first convinced Poirot of his reliability. He described what he had heard on the landing. He described the voice. He described the words. He described the footstep and the breathing and the controlled, weighted retreat of a man accustomed to authority. Counsel for the defense tried, twice, to argue that sound testimony was inherently unreliable, that without visual confirmation, no identification could stand. The judge, a woman of 60 with the expression of someone who has spent 30 years hearing arguments that failed to convince her, allowed the challenge and then allowed Poirot to speak to its refutation. Poirot took the stand for 40 minutes. He explained, in the language of any intelligent person rather than the language of experts, why Edmund Carey's testimony was not lesser than cited testimony, but different, built on a different architecture, with different strengths and different limitations, but in this case, producing evidence of a precision that a cited witness, glancing at a dark landing, could not have matched. He explained what the waiting signified, what the voice said, what the footstep told. He built in that courtroom the picture that Edmund Carey had built in his mind on a dark October landing. Piece by piece, detail by detail, a complete architecture from sound alone. Gerald Waller was convicted of murder. Robert Farnsworth was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. Both received sentences commensurate with the gravity of what they had done, and the law moved on to the next thing, as laws do, as though each case is a thing complete in itself, which it is. And also, as Poirot always knew, is not. On a Friday in November, 3 weeks after the trial concluded, Poirot received a letter. It was written in a hand that was small and precise, with strong consonants and clearly formed letters. It was postmarked Bath, where Edmund Carey had returned after the trial to the house he had lived in for 20 years and which he navigated, Poirot knew, with the same economy and precision with which he navigated everything. The letter was brief. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I am writing to thank you, though the word seems inadequate to the situation. I've been thinking about what you said in court, about the architecture of sound. I had never heard my own experience described to someone who had not lived it, and I confess it was strange to hear. You made it sound, if I may say so, rather more remarkable than I have ever allowed myself to consider it. 45 years of developing an instrument, I have never thought of it that way. I have thought of it as compensation, as a substitution, as making do. You suggested it was something more. I'm considering the possibility that you are right. I have one question, which I hope you will answer with the directness you applied to all other aspects of this matter. When you said, in my room at the Hall, that you knew who it was, had you truly known, or were you using the statement to see how I would respond to it? Yours faithfully, Edmund Carey Poirot, read the letter twice, in his sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions, the morning fire burning low, his tisane cooling beside him. Then he took up his pen and wrote, Dear Monsieur Carey, to answer your question with the directness you request, yes, I had truly known. Not with the certainty of proof. The evidence that the court required came afterward, and required Inspector Graves's more thorough search and your testimony, but with the certainty of the little grey cells which do not speak until they are ready, and when ready, do not equivocate. What convinced me was not any single thing you told me, but the way in which you told it. You did not offer me conclusions. You offered me data. You described breadth and pitch and weight and stride. You gave me measurements where others give impressions. A man who fabricates does not fabricate in units of measurement. He fabricates in emotions, in images, in the large and the dramatic. You gave me the small and the exact. As for what I said in court, that your testimony was different but not lesser, I meant this literally, not as advocacy. The architecture of sound has a quality that vision lacks. It cannot be redirected. A sighted witness looks where the action draws the eye. They can be fooled by misdirection, by the thing that moves at the edge of vision, by the staged event that occupies the foreground. You cannot be fooled in this way. You heard what was there, not what was shown to you. Mrs. Farnsworth sounds, from what I have gathered of her, like someone who deserved more time. I'm glad that a man who listened carefully to a symphony could help give her some measure of the justice she did not live to claim. Yours, Hercule Poirot. He folded the letter, sealed it, and set it aside for posting. Outside the window of Whitehaven Mansions, London proceeded with its usual confident indifference to the dramas occurring within it. A bus passed. A dog barked. Two women argued briefly about the price of something on the pavement below and then resolved it in the way of women who have more important matters than arguments, which is to say, they stopped and moved on. Poirot sat in his chair by the fire. He thought about a landing in October and a man who stood in the dark and heard everything. He thought about a woman who had walked into a hotel on a Wednesday, hoping that the week would find its way to a different life, and who had run out of week before the life arrived. He thought about the particular quality of attention that 45 years of darkness builds in a person. Not compensation, not substitution, not making do, but something genuine and original, something that had no sighted equivalent, something that existed fully itself in the space that most people leave empty because they have eyes and therefore never learn to listen in that way. He thought about two words spoken in a darkened corridor. "You're late." And he thought about how the man who spoke them had made, in speaking them, the only error that mattered. Not the error of being heard, though he had been heard, but the error of dismissing the hearing, the error of standing in a dark corridor and failing to account for the man who could not see him. Cecily Farnsworth had wanted her life back. It was the only thing she had wanted in the end. Not revenge, not justice, not the punishment of the man who had made her life small and the man he had sent to end it. Just the ordinary thing. Just the life. She had not gotten it. This was the part of the work that Poirot carried with him always. That justice, even when achieved, was not the same as undoing. It was something. It was necessary. It was, in a world that offered no better option, essential. But it was not the same. He picked up his tisane. He drank it with the careful attention of a man for whom every small thing is done properly, because the small things are the architecture of order, and order is what stands between the world as it is and the world as it might otherwise become. Outside, the bus had gone. The dog had stopped barking. The two women had walked away. London carried on. And somewhere in Bath, in a house navigated by memory and the tap of a staff and 45 years of extraordinary, meticulous attention, a man sat by his window and listened to the morning, the birds, the traffic, the particular language of a city in November, and heard in all of it everything.